All right, let's go. Welcome to eCom Raw Reality episode 25. And in this one, we will talk about e-commerce and why it is just like a video game. So, if you have played video games in the past, any of the video games out there, be it Call of Duty, which is first-person shooter, be it Age of Empires, which was more of a strategy game, right? So we have so many games out there. And if we look at life or e-commerce more specifically as a video game, then we can see, just like in a video game, that you start by actually knowing nothing, and then you advance to the point where you just get on calls, you look at a funnel, you look at ads, and then you pretty much realize quickly that you can actually fix this. Or, for example, if it's in a video game, actually win, right? So this is why we can think of e-commerce as a video game, because that framing actually helps us understand that we can actually learn and improve and get better at it. Because personally, I've started around 7 years ago, I think, at this point, with some e-commerce brands here in Europe, and slowly transitioned with working with bigger brands in the US because it is the biggest market. I've worked with brands from Australia as well, and they are really cool, I would say, in most cases, both the people, the brands out there. But unfortunately, the time zone isn't the most convenient for anyone in the US, and to some extent even for anyone in Europe. So fortunately, we can't work with anyone unless we just want to move there or totally change our schedule. But when it comes to looking at the video game, which is e-commerce, there are definitely different things that we can focus on, right? Just like in a video game, let's say World of Warcraft, if you've ever played that, where you can pick your character. Like, is it an orc? Is it a magician? Is it whatever? I can't remember the names. It's been like 15 years since I probably last played it. So like in a video game, you select your weapon, you select your race, let's say, and each has their own strengths, right? And that's why it's really important, even when you're playing in e-commerce, to know what you're good at, right? For example, I'm, let's say, skilled in all areas, but I wouldn't say that I'm better at sales versus actually media buying, for example. And to some extent, I would say that I'm not the best in the world, probably not even 1% at media buying necessarily. But because of the other skills that come with it, such as communication, psychology, data analysis, and multiple other skills, that's when you actually get much better at it. And one thing that really helps is understanding where you're at in terms of levels, because we're not at level 100, if 100 would be the maximum, right? None of us. Also because if you don't actually learn or you don't get better, your level actually decreases, because let's say 100 is the maximum. However, what you know now won't be enough in 1 month from now. So if there's any change in the algorithm or any change in the tools that you are using, right? Or if someone can do things better, then they'll be at 100 while you're declining, right? And I think competition is actually healthy. Personally, I don't necessarily think of competition. So I'm looking at myself and looking at how good am I? Like, that is the question that you should be asking yourself. How good are you at doing that specific thing for, let's say, a specific brand or specific company, specific agency, depending on who you work with, right? And that's really important, because this type of framing actually, it gives you some freedom in terms of how you look at things. You understand that it's not necessarily a limitation on yourself. Sometimes it's actually a limitation on the brand, right, that you would be working with in e-commerce. Because you can think like this: you're just one person in a guild, right, or on a team, if you can think of Call of Duty or World of Warcraft or whatever other games are popular nowadays. Sometimes it's a team versus let's say, the world, more or less, right? Because you are working with a brand, let's say, or your own brand, or with another brand if you're an agency or freelancer, and you are trying together as a team to outcompete other brands on the market, because we're actually only speaking about e-commerce right now, right? So we're thinking in terms of brands and who those brands have on their team, right? For example, personally, I do help brands on multiple things, meaning that I actually am coming more so as a growth strategist, right? Let's say a CMO type of role, because I can look at almost all parts of their business. It doesn't mean that I'm going to help them with everything, right? Because unless they have the funds and can invest in like someone actually spending more of their time on their business, of course you can only help them with a specific area, right? That's why one of the main services that I help brands with are paid ads, email, and I would say beyond those, because those are actually like the executional parts, right? But you have to do them really well, right? Because I mean, anyone can do paid ads more or less nowadays. It's super easy. However, there's a learning curve, and if you don't have experience from the past by working with other brands, there's a lot of context that you might be missing, right? So that's where I'm also aware that I might have worked with 20, 30 brands over time, right? Which is, let's say, medium, right? Like I haven't worked just with one, but also now with 100. And of course, there are benefits, but drawbacks as well. The benefit is that you have experience in a multitude of industries, so your experience increases. However, because you haven't worked just with one brand, let's say, you've never went as deep, right? Like you never had to do customer service. You never had to think of maybe shipping, suppliers, and so on, right? Like so many things that you might need to care about if you are actually working in a brand and you are dedicating 40 hours a week for that brand, right? But then of course, like if you work with 100 brands, it's like you never went, maybe not even, not deep, but like not even to a medium sized, let's say, understanding of the business, right? Because there are layers, and that's why you have some people who are executing, and usually because they are so busy with executing, right, they're really good at shooting an arrow or just shooting in general, if we think of a game, but they're not as, let's say, skilled overall in terms of understanding, like, why do I actually use a hammer here, you know? Like they don't have time or energy or interest to actually think about that, right? They are great executioners. They can drill a hole, but they don't think in terms of, all right, why am I actually drilling this hole, you know? And like I sometimes do the same thing. I do something again and again without actually thinking about it, and this is where some of the value comes from, because it's actually more important in some cases to know what to do and what not to do. And this is where basically you can see the experience that someone has. That's why it takes time. And if you think of yourself as a video game character, you understand what you're better at, what you're not better at, and where you might need to fill in some of the gaps, right? For example, personally, as an introvert, I had to learn communication, let's say sales to some extent, to a higher degree actually, then psychology. So a lot of skills that aren't necessarily as valuable for looking at data and trying to make decisions, but it's really helpful when you are trying to communicate those decisions, or when you are trying to sell a service, because you might be the best out there, you might be the best fit. Just like you could go on dates and you could actually find your best partner ever, your future husband, wife, but because you don't know how to communicate your value, right, you're just like missing an opportunity. It's just like if you're playing soccer, football. If you are the best shooter on your team, but because of your lack of confidence or because of your environment, someone likes to take the shots instead of you, and because you're not taking the shots, of course you can't score a goal, right? And this is really important to process because while even listening to me, listening to myself, or you listening to me right now, you can start to get new ideas in terms of where the gaps might be and what you could do. Because if you look at everything as a video game, you know that on some video games you don't see the map. It's dark, and that's because you haven't explored it. So this is how you can think of learning new things. Because if you don't know CRO, if you don't know financial modeling, if you don't know how to forecast, if you don't know media buying, if you don't understand creatives, I mean, there are so many skills, right? And you won't be 10 out of 10 at all of them. But if you are T-shaped, right, so understanding a little bit of everything, and then a T has one, let's say, a line that's deeper, and that means it's a skill that you're much more developed at, because maybe it comes easy for you. And I would say that's one of the more important things, knowing what's easy for you and just doing that, because then it's not actually you doing it with a lot of effort, right? It's just like if you're an introvert and you're trying to be in sales, it will be draining every day to call people. And if someone rejects you, it's like, all right, let's put this down, new person. Let's put this down, new person. Let's put this down, new person. So, and because you are actually getting drained by talking with people, and outreach in general, like, it's not the best for like anyone. Although if you like it, meeting new people, because you know eventually, because if you call enough people, you will get some calls or you will meet new people. So you might enjoy that aspect. Just like myself, I am sometimes on calls where that call might not go anywhere. However, some of them go somewhere. Maybe we relate in some cases, we stay in touch, maybe we find opportunities to work together later on, maybe we just have a good chat, right? So there are so many things that could go in the right direction, meaning in a positive way. So it's not always like wasted time, unless you really don't like it. That's when you could say that you also wasted your time, you also didn't like it, and there was also no result. I mean, if you have all three of those, yeah, there's a problem, and that has to be fixed. So right now we're closing in on around 40 minutes, so I think we can wrap up this video. I just wanted to make this analogy because video games are very popular, and they are due to a couple of reasons, and that is gamification. That's where the word gamification actually comes from, right? Games. And video games do this extremely well. They understand psychology at a very high level, and they use music. And this is something that you should actually think of. Why aren't you using music sometimes when your mood isn't the best, right? Because games do that. They play with your emotions with music. Movies. Watch a horror movie, but with music that's funny, like from cartoons, it won't be as scary anymore. That's how much of an effect music has. But that's, I would say, enough for this one, just because we could probably talk for hours here about psychology, how to do some things or how to look at things. But to keep this brief, I would say that's pretty much it, looking at e-commerce as a video game as well, and understanding that things do change. You also need to get better and improve your stats, right? Plus 5 XP, plus 5 mana, plus 10 points for your communication skills and so on. And things can always be improved for sure. And that's a good thing. And for some, I guess, it's not mentally such a good thing, because they know that there's always more work to be done. But we're aware of that, and we don't need to overwork sometimes. So that's pretty much it. And if you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like, comment, and until next time, peace out.